thinking how. I literally thought, okay, well, there's obviously, I am broken. I am broken and there's something evilly wrong with me, because how can someone have spent 15 years already in depth committed to healing themselves and be such a terrible mom, such a terrible mom?
Ever feel like you suck at this job? Motherhood, I mean. Have too much anxiety and not enough patience? Too much yelling, not enough play? There's no manual, no village, and no guarantees. The stakes are high. We want so badly to get it right. But this is survival mode. We're just trying to make it to bedtime. So if you're full of mom guilt, your temper scares you, you feel like you're screwing everything up, and you're afraid to admit any of those things out loud, this podcast is for you. This is Failing Motherhood. I'm Danielle Bettman, and each week we'll chat with a mom ready to be real, sharing her insecurities, her fears, her failures, and her wins. We do not have it all figured out. That's not the goal. The goal is to remind you, you are the mom your kids need. They need what you have, you are good enough, and you're not alone. I hope you pop in earbuds, somehow sneak away, and get ready to hear some hope from the trenches. You belong here, friend. We're so glad you're here. Hey, it's Danielle. I know I hype up every single episode, but I am not kidding you with this one. I had to jump it up in the queue and make sure that it got out into the world as soon as possible because I am just so excited about it. Today, I am talking to Aly Pain. Growing up, Aly was the smart, fun girl on the outside and a frantic, anxious mess on the inside. She spent years healing the pain of dysfunctional family relationships, including eating disorders, a suicide attempt, and abuse, to break the cycle raising her own teen boys. Today, she's been married for over 25 years and has 2 incredible sons. Aly's passion is empowering parents to build healthy, respectful relationships with their teens without giving up or giving up, even if they've tried everything and are at their wits' end. Now, my daughters are 7 and 8 right now at the time of this airing, and I find it to be an incredible honor and privilege to be able to talk to Aly and have this conversation on the front end of my kids becoming teenagers. And I know most of families that I talk to, they dread the teen years. They are just so scared and unsure and just don't know what to think. And we are raising kids in an entirely different world. So much is changing. There's so many dangers. Like, it's a big deal. So for you to be a parent of a infant or a toddler or a preschooler or a school ager, getting to hear this information now is going to be a game changer. I guarantee it. I really, really, really urge you to send this episode to your partner so that they can get in on this perspective as well and be able to talk about it, share it with your friends, empower each other with this perspective, because I really feel like hearing this episode alone can change the trajectory of years for your family and a lot of families, anyone that can hear this episode. So the things that we cover start off with Aly's story and how she got into working with families. And then I start to pick her brain about the teen years, and she shares about brain development and what is going on and how the movie Inside Out is really, really true. And so we talk about the visual and we talk about understanding, and she shares a really powerful analogy about a ball and trying to basically like drown the ball when you need to lift up the ball. You will get it when you hear it, and I promise it will stick with you. Then we cover the analogy of riding a bike with no brakes downhill into a cactus. And how that's hope-giving, I guess. You just have to listen to the end. Promise me that you will listen to this episode until the end, because everything that we build on continues to get better and better. We both are on the verge of tears at multiple points in this episode, and because it's just so near and dear to our hearts. We just want parents and kids to understand each other. Whether they are 3 or whether they are 13, you are the parent that they need. You just need to be empowered and equipped with more tools and more perspective and understanding to do that well. And we are giving that to you here in this episode. So promise me that you finish this episode. Promise me that you share it with your partner, share it with a friend, and change the narrative when it comes to parenting teens. So here's my episode with Aly. Welcome to Failing Motherhood. My name is Danielle Bettman, and on today's episode, I'm joined by Aly Pain. Hey, Aly.
Good morning.
How are you?
I am so excited to be here. I'm so excited to connect with someone who has such a similar purpose and heart for parents and kids, and knowing that there might be an easier way. We were just never taught it.
Yes. And we were already connecting on this Tuesday that's really a Monday, and how we're just very human today. And so, we're on the same page. We're going to get along just fine. We're just going to be real. We're going to be real, and that's what we do here on this podcast. So, welcome. Have you ever felt like you were failing motherhood?
Let me count the ways. Whoosh, it's a big one. Yes, a lot, all the time, moment to moment. It's a box of chocolates. I don't know how to even answer that. There's so many things.
Yes. I love it. I always get a new response, but it's always welcome. You are our people.
Yes.
Tell listeners who you are and who's in your family.
Okay, so again, I'm Aly Pain, and I am Canadian, and I'm over here in British Columbia. I was also born and raised very close to where I live. I grew up with one sister and middle class, my mom and dad, who live in their original home that I grew up in. And my husband, we've been married for 25 years, and we have 2 sons. They're 18 and 20. And my oldest has generalized anxiety, OCD. He was diagnosed when he was 7 or 8. But I knew he was different from the time he was 18 months old. He was a very different child. And I have been doing this work for 15 years now. And I combine everything from my own childhood. I grew up in a very traumatic childhood. It was a very emotionally abusive, somewhat physically abusive home. No, my parents are not evil or the spawn of Satan. They had much worse than what I got. And so they did do their best to break the cycle, even though it was not okay. And I take everything from what I learned then. I was a straight A student, award-winning athlete, highly perfectionism driven, which comes a lot from emotionally abusive situations. I started diet pills at 12. That was an eating disorder that went on for 14 years. I started drinking at 13. I started skipping school at 15, and then the wheels fell off at 16, and I could no longer, even though I knew what was happening at home was wrong and I knew the messages were wrong, they had infiltrated my army of my now developing adolescent brain that had less capacity to fend those off. And I went from straight A's to F's and failing out in grade 11 and a suicide attempt at 17. And I turned my life around on my own in grade 12 to go back to being the top academic athletic student in my grad year. And that was, let's just say that was a great move, and I'm very proud of myself, but there was no, I literally did that on my own. I had zero support from anybody. And I went away to university, and that's when I realized, holy schmoly, the voices in my head are really not okay. Because you see, when you grow up in abuse, the messages that are going on in the home all the time that then unfortunately stick, right? And they're the toxic tapes that play, they fit the environment. Like they fit that environment. So then I go away to university and I'm living in residence and there's all these toxic tapes and awful stuff going on in my head, but it doesn't match the environment anymore. that was the moment I was like, we are going to get ourselves into counseling in a hot minute. And I went straight down to student services, and that started my, let's see, what is that now? Nearly 30 something years of healing. And I take all of that, everything I learned through all of my healing, personal development, life coach training, relationship coach training, parenting, and I put all that together to advocate for the relationship. I am not for teens. I am not for parents. I am for the relationship. And unfortunately and thankfully, I can speak wholeheartedly to both.
I love that. I feel like sometimes it's like you're a translator or like an interpreter between the two sides of that relationship coin.
Yes, I absolutely feel that way. When I'm speaking to teens, I can say that, okay, this is what your parent is saying. I understand it may not be coming out right, but this is where they're coming from. What could you make? And they're like, oh, okay, well, but they said it me. I'm like, yes, they could have said it differently, but this is what they're, and then it's always, I just finished a program on Friday with parents, and the number one thing in all the comments is, I just can't believe I'd forgotten what it was like to be a teen, or I didn't understand where they were coming from, or and they instantly turn their relationship into a more constructive, healthy place. It's not perfect by any means, but it's that perspective is everything.
Yeah. So what did you go to college for? And then how did that end up to where you're at today?
Oh, I did not expect that question. Okay. All right. Well, you asked. Here it is.
I'm going to buckle in.
Yeah. So my parents truly believed that I was a lost cause and one of the laziest people that they'd met. So they decided my career for me based on their good friend's daughter who had similar interests and academic skills. And so, yeah, my parents chose my career for me because they were certain that if I took a gap year, I would never go back to school and I'd be unemployable, homeless, and living under a bridge. So I took biomedical electronics. Now, what that is, it's very specialized. It is repairing medical equipment. So any patient-applied device, from defibrillators, intravenous pumps, hemodialysis machines, you name it, pretty much anything that is used on a patient, I fix that. No apologies, I am an electronics nerd. Okay, I have 2 boys and I was the one who fixed all the toys. So I do love me a good electronics moment, nerding out. However, in doing that job, my first employment was with a private company who had contracts with the BC Ministry of Health. And I was on call 24/7, 365. So at 22 years old, I had pretty much no friends. I worked 80 hours a week. I drove 80 to 100,000 kilometers per year because my area was BC. And even way back then, as old as I am, taking all my tools on an airplane was still sketchy. So it was just easier to drive and have spare machines with me just in case I was in the middle of nowhere and couldn't fix it, because I only had 48 hours to help this patient before they had to go to a hospital. So that fit my need for trauma because my nervous system was already completely hijacked. So why not be on a pager and on call 24/7 and get calls all the time and have those life and death situations? Yeah, that fit my trauma need right there.
Yep. Yes, familiar.
And I was getting, too many calls at 2 and 3 in the morning. And so I basically approached the BC Ministry of Health and I said, you guys do a great job at training these patients on the equipment itself before they leave the hospital to go to very remote areas. Because I never went to, yes, I did take care of clinics, but mostly home patients is what I ended up doing. And I said, but you suck at teaching them like the technical part. Like they're in the middle of nowhere and a red light starts flashing. They need to be empowered. And of course, they were union and I was not. And so I wrote a groundbreaking patient technical training program that every patient before they left the hospital had to take with me. And I got a lot less calls at 2 and 3 in the morning. And that program is still running.
Oh, wow.
So that was my moment where I knew I hated my job because it just kept reinforcing trauma and I had no friends. And what did I like about it? And I spent a long time driving by myself saying, what do you like about this? And I decided it's the people. I am on this earth to empower people. I didn't know how yet.
Mm-hmm.
But that was the moment where I started changing my career into soft skills training and then landed in life coach training certification, relationship systems coach training certification, healing a lot more of my own trauma and becoming the parent that I wanted and that my kids desperately needed.
Yeah, you just, sum that up with a big, pretty bow and
Yeah, there you
go.
So basically, I'm
That's
an
how that goes.
electronics nerd who decided to work with people.
Okay.
There you go.
I love it.
You can edit that out later.
No. So how did you come into parenting, and who were you as a parent those first few years?
Oh, gosh. Okay, so I had started my own counseling at 18 on campus when it was free. Then my best friend, who became my husband, was the only person I'd ever revealed anything about my eating disorder, and he, bless him, literally did everything in his power to get me into a program. But irony, I wasn't bad enough at it or good
Don't
enough
you
at
hate
it.
that?
You pick. I know, like I couldn't even be good enough at that. And then so really years of there was talk therapy. I spent 10 years in personal development. Every single month for 10 years, I either took a program, assisted a program, or was practicing to lead a program. And that was huge for me to start to understand that maybe I wasn't a piece of shit. Maybe all of the negative messages, like I needed to grab onto things like personality style assessments. I need that actually my personality style wasn't on the section that said this person is a horrible, useless waste of skin. My personality style was actually somewhere on the graph. And it wasn't wrong. I was 26 the first time I sat in a class and thought, maybe I'm not okay, not like bad. Maybe I'm okay. 26. So 10 years of that.
Yeah.
I get married and we have kids, and I think, okay, I'm going to completely redo this because I've done so much work. It's like, my kids are going to be so compliant and sweet. And I joke about this, like for real, I thought I was going to be Mary Poppins. It's okay to laugh. Yeah, it's okay to laugh at that.
I'm with you. I was early childhood trained, worked in classrooms, like did this for a job. I played with kids. Like I got this. I'm gonna be amazing. Right? All the Pinterest.
I'm like, how could I not be Mary Poppins when I've done 10 years of personal development on top of therapy and everything else? Come on. Well, lo and behold, it didn't turn out that way. And so everything that I had done to understand who I was, to begin to love myself, to build confidence, to know that was all good. It was all amazing and necessary. And what I realized when I became a parent, it was really just the first step. Because me with me is one thing, but me with you is another thing.
Oh, yeah.
And parenting, shocking, pushes all of your buttons you maybe didn't even know you had. Mm-hmm. So it reintroduced me to the fantastical trauma in my brain and how the triggers, and I'm going to just say this right now, triggers is like our super sexy word. I'm not using it like that. I am using it in the actual psychological definition of triggers, okay? The triggers that were seated deeper in my brain than the work I had previously done. So it was time to go to the next level because I saw myself failing as a mom. I saw myself getting triggered, literally emotionally hijacked. I was doing the same thing that I grew up in, that sudden, unpredictable, violent anger. And I don't mean necessarily violent toward my kids, although I did spank them twice. And I just posted a TikTok on one of my worst things that I did where I hauled my kid up by his arm. I'm surprised I didn't dislocate his shoulder. And yes, I did that. And that's one of my worst memories. I realized it was time to get on the business of, although that felt horribly defeating, thinking how I literally thought, okay, well, there's obviously, I am broken. I am broken and there's something evilly wrong with me.
Yep.
Because how can someone have spent 15 years already in depth committed to healing themselves and be such a terrible mom, such a terrible mom? but that was like what I said I didn't realize was I was healing me with you, like in a relationship, in a parenting situation was a whole other ballgame. And I happened to be taking on my life coach training and certification, and then my relationship systems coach training and certification at around that time. My kids were around 3. And so that literally became my saving grace because it helped me to unpack relationships, including parenting, in a way that I could forward my healing to truly begin to reparent myself as I was as I was also reparenting, parenting my children in the way that was, number one, healthy, safe, still not perfect. Oh, giant hot mess, but it was healthy and it was safe so that I didn't feel like I was such a failure all the time. And that was when I actually started working with moms. Gosh, my kids were, around 8, around when they were about 8.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't modeled for you. And I feel like
no.
And like you can do the background work, but when you don't have something tangibly to be like, what does that look like?
That is the number one reason I think that parents beat themselves up. That's my experience, is they beat themselves up because they're like, well, I must be a bad person or I must be failing. And they, first of all, personalize all of their child's behavior, which, no. Sorry, I tell people this, I get a lot of flack for this. Just because you have an amazing compliant kid doesn't mean you're a great parent. I'm sorry.
They're not
and just because
you
just because you have a child, it's so much personality related too. Just because you have a child who's really struggling and acting out all the time doesn't mean you're a bad parent. So they personalize it, but they also make up this story that you probably get this all the time, that, they had a fairly good childhood, and wait for it, I'm air quoting this, I turned out fine, unquote. And so they don't understand why it's not going well for them. And what I tell them all the time is, your parents are not awful and evil. They're not. But let's be honest for 1 second. No one, partly because we did not have the information and research that we have now, no one taught your parents how to parent. Nobody. No one taught their parents. And so who taught you? Nobody. It's not about intelligence. This is not about you can just love your way to being a great parent. That's not what it's about. And so can we just let ourselves off the hook for a second for the fact that you are in literally the world's hardest job in which there is no training.
Yes. But I should be able to figure this out. I shouldn't have to pay someone to help me figure out how to parent my own kid. I hear that all the time.
And if I do, I must be stupid and bad and weak. And it's like, no. Moreover, what you're saying, your investment is saying, I believe there should be parent training. I don't think I should have to do this alone. I don't think it should feel this hard. And why should my kids have to endure what I did? That doesn't make it normal or okay.
Right.
And that none of this is about fault or blame. Can we just let that go? It's culturally wrong, period. Culturally wrong that we're not teaching people or giving them these critical relational skills. That's not like, okay, I guess it's our fault as a collective, I guess.
Right.
It's not a personal judgment.
No. Nope. No, when we can take that personalization out of it and completely detach and see it for what it is, and be so much more objective about this is just a parent and a kid trying to figure it out as best they can. And we just need more tools, more perspective. Thank God we have the research now. Like, let's dive in. Let's learn something. Yay.
Yeah, let's do that. Gosh.
So what did that look like for you and your boys? Because they're now, how old?
18 and 20.
Okay.
My youngest is at university. I know it's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I hit that marker in last September where I was like, what? I have a kid going to university? What? Like what? So I think this is what you meant by your question, is where my kids and I are right now. We have imperfect, very open, very honest relationships. Different, of course, because they're different. But we literally we talk about the hard stuff and we say hard things to each other. I said something to my oldest the other day, literally a couple weeks ago. Now, my oldest has, as I said, generalized anxiety and OCD. So I call him my Sheldon. If you've ever watched Big Bang Theory,
Yeah.
I basically have a Sheldon. Um, yes. So I said to him, I wanted something done, and I think I'd asked a couple times. And so I said, look, I'm frustrated. Can you please just get this done? Now, what I realized is under my request was I was frustrated about a whole lot of other things. And I was taking that out in this one thing, as if somehow if he just did this one thing, that was going to fix all my frustration about other things. I did have that little awareness in my head.
How often is that the case? Yes.
Right. But he said to me, we do this, we have boundaries around the way we speak to each other, but we are honest and respectful. And he said, please do not talk to me like I'm a 2-year-old. He said, I can tell you right now, I'm not going to go and do this, when I hear that. And I was like, okay, fair. And that's when it was triggering for me in my head that I'm like, yes, I am frustrated about a lot of things right now. And I'm trying to make it about this, and it's not. And I turned to him and I said, no, I said, you're right. I am frustrated. This is what I wanted to happen. This is what hasn't happened. And so asking you felt like the best solution. How can we get to that? And we don't take it personally because we have that safety to say to each other. We also have really, really hard conversations about family dynamics because we talk about mental health in my family all day, every day. I was not born anxious. I have trauma-induced anxiety that I deal with every single day. My son was born anxious. That is the physiology of his brain. So we talk about mental health all the time. We talk about family dynamics and what they like and they don't like, because we've been very open and honest about our families. And we also talk about, we talk about the whole thing. We talk about drinking, drugs, sex, girls. It's all normal because we've talked about it for forever. And we're the kind of family who sits at the dinner table and actually sits there for like 45 minutes well after we're finished eating and is still either usually snot laughing or having, a real like solid conversation about something. So we have the relationship I desperately wanted with my parents, where there's nothing they can't come to me and say, and we can't have a conversation about it. It's going to be messy, but let's do it.
And that's the goal. Literally, with all of my clients, one of the things that we do is write a family business plan. And part of that is thinking about the teen years and writing down what you're aspiring for with your parent-child relationship in the teen years. And hands down, first thing out of their mouth is always open, honest communication. Always. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it might be, because that might be on the tip of their tongue for a myriad of reasons, whether that they got that or they wanted that or, that's something that's been implanted in their head. However, when I ask them, do you feel like you're on the trajectory to get there? And what does that mean for you now? And how are you creating that credibility and trust and all of these things now when they're 3 and 4? We're not sure. We don't know how those things connect the dots. And my fear is that a lot of parents think that you could just kind of like arrive and then that's what your relationship looks like. As long as you hope for it, it happens. So
yeah, that was me. That was me. That was my Mary Poppins vision. I had it.
Right? Yeah. Totally. And it's not wrong to think that, because again, if it's not modeled for you, you connect some dots, make some assumptions, and that makes sense.
Yeah. And you do the best you can regardless. Like, the number of parents who I say, I already believe you're a good parent. I don't have to know you to believe that, because you see how we're here talking. You're already a good parent. Wouldn't it be, and this is what they're doing to themselves, which we kind of already said, but why do we do this to ourselves where we pretend we know what we don't know, and then we shame ourselves for not doing what we were never shown or taught? Why do we do that?
Makes no sense.
Yeah.
Okay, for real though, why do we do this? If you are well on your way in a journey of self-improvement, you've been to therapy, you've been to marriage counseling, you're trying to parent differently than you were parented, and you know how influential this is. Family is the greatest investment, the biggest role that you have in your life. The biggest way to change the world is in your home. But you don't know what you don't know yet. You find yourself bribing and threatening and yelling way more than you like. And you feel like you're failing. And you don't want to screw up your kids. And you and your partner have a little bit of a good cop, bad cop dynamic. One of you is a little bit too permissive. One of them is a little bit too strict and has a temper. Doesn't matter who. We're not calling each other out here. But if that's you, you have a strong-willed child. You're struggling to get them to cooperate with the most basic of tasks, and you just want to survive these toddler years. Maybe they're 4, and they are just really 4, and you are waiting for it to get better, and it's not. What you're doing just isn't working. And there are more tools. Positive discipline works, friends. And when you commit to change and you transform your family by writing a family business plan, this investment lasts a lifetime. Coaching is the container and the tools for you to be able to change your family's dynamic, your culture, and your trajectory towards the relationships you want to have. When everything feels out of your control right now, this is something that can use your energy to build your patience, to build your parenting toolkit, and to have each other's back as parenting partners. How incredibly powerful is that when you both speak the same language, you're hearing the same things at the same time, and you're both trying out new ways of handling things, and you're doing it together, and you know your family's core values, you know how you are setting out to spend your time and money, you have family rules and a family mission statement, and all of these ways that you have clarity and confidence in who you are. You can parent the heck out of your kids in your own brand and feel so good about it. So, if any of that sounds like it would meet the goals of your family right now and you're just in a season where you're ready for change, let's talk. Go to parentingwholeheartedly.com/coaching or just schedule a time on my calendar using the link that's on that page, or go to wholeheartedly.as.me/call. And then we can meet. And I would love to hear more about your family, and then we can both see if it would be a good fit to work together. I can share more details, answer your questions, all that good stuff. So don't wait another day. I mean, the pandemic's not going away anytime soon. Your kiddo's gonna be strong-willed. Let's do this together. I cannot wait to meet you and to come alongside you. It is my greatest joy. All right, back to the episode with Aly. You promised you would finish it. Go ahead. So I brought you on here to pick your brain about the teen years because everyone I talk to that is in the frame of mind of raising toddlers, preschoolers, early elementary kids, they dread the teen years for the most part. We use that word dread a lot. And it's always, I can't even think about it. It's going to be awful. Just projecting a whole lot of things. And I would love for you to be able to speak to maybe some of the myths or the misconceptions, or just speak life into not only the benefits of the teen years and being able to create a vision for a great relationship for your kids, but just being able to help them see what now they can do tangibly with that parent-child relationship to lay the groundwork to get to where you want to go.
Okay,
so, lay out your life's work.
I love this question. And I'm so grateful that you asked it and that I have the time to address it because it really is critical. So for all of you who are like, yeah, Okay, so this is where you put your tea down, sit down, listen up. Here it is. I'm not saying this to contradict anything you've saying. It's just even the words parent-child relationship. I'm going to tell you the truth. The minute the pituitary gland explodes in your child's brain, which you and they will get no notice for, you are not in a parent-child relationship. And every single parent who comes into my programs is struggling for that number one reason. This is just one of the worst jokes that ever was played on human beings. If you parent in a way that generally works for 10 years, let's say, I don't know, a decade, and it generally works. You have a relatively friendly, relatively compliant child who, you don't have to change their diaper anymore. They get up, they get dressed. Like, you've got some independence, they go to school. You don't have to be with them every second. You're like, hey, I think I've got this. Why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you think that? And then it happens. That pituitary gland explodes in their brain. Okay. And I'm just going to quickly cover. So the adolescent brain is the second and final growth phase in the human lifetime in the brain. Yes, I said growing. I don't just mean, everyone's like, oh yeah, I know their brain is developing. No. Growing. So if you've ever watched the movie Inside Out, that's not just some little fun cartoon. That's real. It's a pretty simple look at it, but what it's showing is happening in Riley's brain is real. It's called pruning and myelination. So what's happening is their brain is going from a simple computing system to a more complex computing system, AKA their entire upper intellectual brain is actually growing all new hardware, all new. And the pruning part is what happens in the Inside Out movie when all of its seemingly good, simple memories, all those pathways are being destroyed. And the brain is rewriting 10 more for every one. That's a very approximate number, okay? For every one that it had. So if they knew how to find that happy memory, now all of a sudden there's 10 different pathways to that same memory and different ways to look at it. And they are wired for negativity. So not only is their brain growing new hardware, it's developing new software all at the same time. Yeah, it's like Cirque du Soleil in there. Yeah. So this is necessary to be a successful independent adult. Okay, it is necessary. So the minute that happens, which of course you get no notification and no, it wasn't in the small print when you brought your child home, you don't have a parent-child relationship, and everything that worked for you for the last 10 to 12 years won't work anymore. But because no one tells us this, funny joke, what do? What our human brains do when something isn't quite working, even though it worked for a decade, we just go do more of it. And then when it doesn't work, we just go do more and more. And we're like, oh, why is this not working? And then it goes to DEFCON 2. Then it goes to where parents are now blaming themselves, which we've talked about, because there must obviously be something wrong with me. Like, I must have missed the memo. Why isn't this working? It's a very unfair joke. Mm-hmm. And they start to resent and retaliate in tiny, nuanced ways against their teen in a way that basically says, either you get back to being who I knew you were. Like, why are you being this way? I mean, it's a choice. You don't have to be this way. Why are you choosing to be this way? Either you get back to being the person that I knew and I loved, or we are going to have some serious consequences. Mm-hmm. And so we end up in criticism, judgment, the queen of consequences, a consequence carousel, which never ends because your child is never going back to being that child. They physiologically can't. They can't. They are a different person fundamentally. And so your parenting has to adapt, and nobody tells us that. Mm-hmm. So nobody tells us that you can't, the way they were which was more like your mini me, Simon Says, because that's how their brains learn, is by mimicking what you do. And they like to spend time with you, and that's not who they are anymore. And parents are like, well, I've tried everything and all I get is I don't know. And they're doing all these things. Yes, because in the child years, they were a sponge, absorbing everything they could from you and their environment to decide who they were. And now that sponge is full and it is not absorbing anymore. Now it is taking what it knows and forming and shifting that into who they are. And you get the raw feed. You get the raw feed on behavior, you get the raw feed on the verbal, you get the raw feed on the whole dang thing. Does that make them bad, wrong, or you a failure? No, it doesn't. It means so many parts of parenting have to change. And I wish this was just, you have to say a lot less, because their propensity for listening, because they have a highly inefficient processing system in their brain during this time when they're growing all new hardware and developing all new software at the same time, they have a highly inefficient processing system. So what became the things you would normally say to them are now lectures. Mm-hmm. So you need to be super brief, super brief. You need to listen more than you lecture. And I cannot emphasize that enough. But don't I have to tell them like tell them all the risks about what they just said? No. Just because your kid comes home and talks about vaping doesn't mean they're going to go vape. They're talking about vaping. Let them talk about vaping. What if instead of trying to lecture, you just got curious? Interesting. Tell me more. Are your friends doing it? What do you think? What's fun about it? What's not fun? What do you think would happen? Just get curious, because what they're doing as they are verbally processing is helping the myelination in their brain. It's helping them to develop critical analysis, decision making. And that also comes as a very argumentative. The teenage brain is naturally emotionally hijacked most of the time, because their emotional brain's fully formed, but if you consider the upper brain sort of like the turtle shell, right? Their shell they're getting a new shell. Well, if you had a turtle who was getting a new shell, it'd be pretty afraid of a lot of things too, because it has nothing to protect itself. Mm-hmm. So that's why they are often frustrated, defensive, angry, negative. Yeah, that's the teenage brain. But how heartbreaking is that when no one tells you, and you like just adored and loved, or maybe tolerated, I don't know, this young child that you had, and now you see it as, why are you choosing to be this way? What is your effing problem? They're not choosing. And then you know that most teenagers tell me they think they're going crazy. They think they're broken. They're terrified, because no one is telling this to them either.
Yeah.
And so a whole bunch of my work is educating parents on why their brain is different, how they perceive the world, also based on my own experiences, because so many teenagers are struggling with anxiety and depression, and again, having swam in that ocean for a while, to explain that to them, but to also explain to them that their sadness, their grief of no longer having the child they knew, turned into resentment, which somehow turned into retaliation and control to try to get them to go back to being the way they were. And that's normal and natural. If you're listening, okay, this is a normal, unfortunate, and I think unnecessary trajectory in a parent lifetime, which is why I will keep doing what I'm doing until my last breath.
Yeah. And I saw something you posted recently, I can't remember if it was Instagram or TikTok, where you talked about how prevalent it feels to be a teen that doesn't feel like they belong in their home.
Yeah. And that's exactly why teenagers feel like, this is a Brené Brown research thing that we're talking about, if you haven't heard about it, where the definition of fitting in is having to abandon, deny, or suppress any part of yourself in order to feel loved, accepted, and welcome. And belonging only requires you to be all of yourself, messy and totally imperfect, to feel loved and accepted. And most teenagers tell me, and actually in her book, Braving the Wilderness, I believe, might have been the previous one, she actually talks about her research, having sat down with teenagers, and the number of teenagers who say they have to deny, suppress, or abandon part of themselves to fit in, to feel loved at home, because this whole mess is going on where their parents aren't understanding this is who they're becoming, and they cannot ever go back to who you knew they were. It's like the world's worst punchline.
Yeah. And there's got to be a huge narrative of fear there too, of just fear driving the parenting decisions.
Right, because and a lot of that fear is based on when we personalize their behavior, right? So if you personalize your now tween, it can happen anywhere around 10 to 14. It just really depends on the brain. You personalize their behavior as being somehow that you're doing something wrong, because parent shaming, can I just say, that's a huge thing. And so if your child acts out, we as a global culture are taught somehow you're failing.
Yep.
And because that's an ego trigger, and I'm not saying you're all egotistical, I'm just saying that's like a normal ego trigger in the brain. So we go to, no, you go back to being who I loved you. And just that statement alone says, I need you to fit in here because you do not belong.
Yeah. And I think when the risks get higher in our perception as a parent, and it feels like the consequences are bigger, or they can make these choices that are life-altering and, deadly in some cases, so much more dangerous than the perceived choices that our child had 5 years ago, that feels like a lot of pressure to get these years right.
It does. And unfortunately, again, as parents, what we go to is control.
Mm-hmm.
Like the teenage brain is wired for risky behavior. It's wired for curiosity. It lacks emotional regulation, impulse control, a lot of those things. And so that's why the adolescent brain is wired for stuff like that. So in not knowing any other way, because we are not taught this, parents go to control. And I get messages. I'm sure you do too. Like the DMs, so they went out drinking. What's the consequence? I'm going to have to ground them. I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa. Well, I caught them vaping. No, I've taken their phone and their door and their mattress and whoa, back up the bus. But now they're doing weed. And so I'm going to kick them out of the house. And hold the phone. They're skipping school and they won't show up, and I've taken all of their things until they care about school. Wow, back up. Just step back. Step back for a second. Behavior is still communication. All behavior is communication. It's not different than when they were 2. I always tell parents, it's not what they're doing. It's when you do the work to figure out why they're doing it. Now, am I saying there should never be a consequence? No, I'm not saying that. But I'm saying if you go to consequence first, you are operating in an environment of control, oppression, suppression, and you are never dealing with, that's the top of the iceberg. Like, right. I don't know if you've ever tried pushing something that floats like a ball underwater. What's your luck in getting it to stay underwater? Mm-hmm. And P.S., that's how your teenager feels. Their lips are just above the water. And when you consequence that continued behavior, which are actual cries for help, numbing, or coping, you are pushing them under the water. Rather than put your hand under the water, get under them and lift them up above the water where they can breathe. And that is addressing the emotions under the behavior. That sometimes it's just a stupid choice. Sometimes it's because they feel so lost because no one's telling them about what's going on in their brain that they're terrified. Sometimes it's that they feel they have to fit in at home, not because you're a bad parent, but because there's just an emotional disconnect, which is normal in any relationship. And so going under the water is to lift them up is the harder work because you have to go in there with them.
Oof.
And create that emotional safety to have the hard conversations to understand why are they smoking weed? Why are they using weed? What is it about vaping? What happened when you went out and got drunk last night and came home and puked all over my rug? You know, what happened when you were dating this person and, you know, some maybe assault happened, or like that they're a hurting, afraid, scared person who has all of the emotional capacity of an adult, but doesn't have the intellectual function to ask for what they need, to know, because remember, it's a very inefficient system. So they internally know what they need, but it's literally like being trapped. This is what teenagers tell me and how I describe it. It's like taking a huge dog crate over in the corner of the room, putting your teenager in it, and then closing the door. That's how they feel in the teen brain. They know what they need and they know what they want on an intrinsic level, but they don't know how to articulate it.
Yeah.
So it takes work. And pushing them back under the water, that holds you both hostage in a situation that there's very few sustainable outcomes.
Yeah. That is such a powerful visual because I think it's so tangible. You can wrap your mind around the bobbing of the tennis ball in the water.
Trying to keep that ball
Yep.
under the water. That's
Yep.
what constantly consequencing a teenager's unsavory choices does, is it just keeps pushing them under the water. You're not dealing, you're literally pushing them under the water.
Yep. And I can see so many correlations to the work that I do with parents with 3-year-olds because they have a very similar level of intellectual, emotional intelligence to be able to communicate their needs, clearly and tell you what's going on below the behavior because they're using their behavior as communication. And just this weekend, I did a training for early childhood providers, and somebody came up to me afterwards and they were like, okay, when you had all the list of like all the things that behavior could be communicating, one of them was, I miss your attention, so I'm going to act out to get your negative attention rather than have no attention at all. And she was like, that just struck such a chord for me because I was talking to my daughter. This is a grandma. And I was talking to my daughter. She had been working, and then the husband had been working and she had been isolating because she was sick with COVID. And so she had been away from the kids for several days and then had like come out. And then her 3-year-old was a hot mess. He was acting up all day, and she had called her mom at the end of the day. Like her voice was hoarse from yelling at him. And she was like, I bet he was missing her. I bet he needed attention. And that was what he was using his behavior to get. And I can see that totally differently now. And that's the work. It's the seeing what that behavior is actually doing and what they're getting out of that, how they're using it. And it's because they're hurting. And then we decide that making them worse will make them better. It makes some sense.
I know. But the irony is because from an adult brain looking back, it's like, those are just choices. You're just making conscious choices. So stop making those stupid choices. And then like, we won't have to do this. So this is your fault. And if you would just change, we wouldn't need to do this. So I'm just going to keep pushing you underwater because eventually you'll be like, oh, I should just make a different choice. So that's when I tell parents, particularly, and you're right, the teen and toddler brain are hugely similar, and it is the 2 stages in our lifetime where our brain grows and develops at the same time. So I tell parents all the time that this isn't a conscious choice, but what you need to understand is that this is true in toddlers, but more, I think, in teens from a higher level thinking. All behavior starts at an emotional level. All behavior is a reflection of what I believe about myself, my value, my lovability, So if you are seeing your teen make some sketchy choices that aren't kind of one-off, oh, well, you had to go mark that off your list, didn't you? Just like things that we all do, right? Um, Pushing them back under the water is reinforcing what they already believe about
Yes.
themselves is I don't deserve to be air breathing.
Right. Like, because in my example of that 3-year-old, his subconscious brain is basically panicking. Like, what did I do? Why isn't mom here? What do I need
Right,
to do to get mom
right.
back? And it's not a conscious choice. It's much more of like a subconscious, I'm just feeling off. I'm feeling irritated. I'm feeling insecure. And there's something here that means something about who I am because this parent is writing that script for me based on how they treat me. And then when they yell at me all day, the day that they come back, that reiterates that fear. That creates the whole narrative that I was fearing, puts evidence behind it. So now what?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
That's scary.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is true as toddlers. I think it's parents, as parents, we have a harder time accepting that with our teenager
Yeah.
because they are a relatively independent human being.
They can be
Like
taller than you.
they could be taller than me. They could, they know how to get dressed. They know they have school. Like I don't have to tell them everything that's going on. I don't have to do basic human functioning for them anymore.
Right.
So as a teenager, parents make up that they are choosing these things consciously just to annoy and piss you off when their brain it doesn't have that. And quite frankly, like it's the same for the adult brain.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm really struggling and like I had a really, really rough go 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I wasn't taking care of my brain, and my trauma was just showing its ugly dragon head. And I just sat on the couch when I couldn't even move. I was so paralyzed in that space of fear. It's like it's all right there again. And I'm eating bags of chips and I'm not moving my body and I'm not taking care of my sleep schedule. And you could easily look at me and say, well, for Christ's sakes, Aly, like, take care of yourself. How hard is it? Like, you're an adult, you know these things.
Yeah.
Uh huh. And when my trauma shows up, its voice says, you are so unlovable. So I self sabotage as a reflection of what I currently believe about my value in that moment. It's no different for the
Mm-hmm.
teenage brain, which has far less capacity to intellectualize
Right.
what's going on.
Right.
So they're very emotionally driven in the teen years. Yeah.
It makes so much sense when we just not say I would react in the same way if I was in that position, but bring in those analogies of like it happens to us as adults. We can relate to that similar fear or feeling or overwhelm or emotionally driven behavior. We are not human.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think, to say to parents, look, we're 2 years into a pandemic. Life
Mm.
is generally hard. It was
Mm-hmm.
always stressful and hard. It's just like hard in a different way, stressful in a different way. And, when your parenting brain is already on, in the yellow or red zone of overwhelm and stress, and you've got a teenager who's acting out, I get it. I get it.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, for heaven's sakes, just, you're grounded for a week. Give me your phone. This is where just sort yourself. Like, of course. Yes. Yeah, 100%. Um, Unfortunately, they don't have the capacity and are still, and this is, I think, what makes parenting teens so exhausting is that between, let's say, 6 and 10 years old, your child is developing a significant level of independence. significant level of independence. It's like you finally can sit back, have your coffee, they can have play dates. You don't have to like sit there every moment. They are in activities. You can sit in your car and have like a moment to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That all of a sudden in the teenage years, they need you again, and they need you more than ever. However, they need you to learn the emotional part of living, the emotional side, which we go back to, we were never taught.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why parenting teens is so exhausting, because they require something from you that, if you're like me, you were never taught. Like, I thought boundaries was fear, compliance was fear, respect was fear, or being beaten or verbally abused, or I didn't have a clue what any of that meant. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think like the teenage years are the kind of the I always describe it as riding downhill on a bike that has no brakes, and at the bottom you go smack into a cactus. Like you just like you hit a cactus and you're like on the ground, totally scraped up, battered, bruised, covered in like little needles, and it's painful. It's super painful, and it hits you like that because it requires you, if you're willing, to do the emotional work sometimes, because again, we're not taught this, to do the emotional work that is an invitation for you to take on, so that you can now help your teenager not have to go through some of the things that maybe you went through, even though you, air quotes, turned out okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So for those that don't have a teen yet, is there hope?
Absolutely, there's hope. Absolutely, there is hope. There's 100% hope, and I hope for the billions of people who are going to hear this. I'm holding the vision for the billions of parents who are going to hear this, that they take away from this, oh, shoot, that change is coming. I'm going to really soak in the relationship I have with you and the who you are now, knowing that at some point in the next year or so, perhaps this is going to change, and it won't be against me. It's not to annoy me, but it's going to be hard. You're starting over, trying to figure out who you are with a whole new brain, and I'm going to have to figure out who I am as a parent. So, okay, it's going to be messy. Let's skill up and let's do this.
Let's skill up and let's do this. I love that, because that we don't really have another choice. Game face.
Yeah, we don't. It's raw, it's emotional, it's hard, it's painful. It is relationship work that many parents tell me they've never done in their marriages. Most parents I work with, I just finished a program on Friday, last week, and they say to me, like, this works in your marriage. I'm like, yes, this does work in your marriage. Because again, I skipped a lot of school, but I'm pretty sure I didn't skip the how to have a healthy relationship class, because there wasn't one.
There wasn't one. How is there not one?
No, it's mandatory that we take classes in your native tongue. So for us in North America, for the most part, that's in English. And it's mandatory to have a certain level of like mathematics and a certain level of, but it's never mandatory anywhere to have a certain level of self-awareness and relationship skills. It's not mandatory. It's not even an option, actually. You can't even take it. In fact, in my son's high school 2 years ago, I saw it as an elective, and I just about fell off my chair, having literally lobbied school districts for 15 years now. Educators, and it was actually an option. It was called interpersonal relationship skills or something, and I thought, well, maybe Pluto is a planet again. Like, what now? I mean, I was happy, don't get me wrong, but I just about fell off my chair.
Oh yeah, that is a big development. I'm excited to hear that.
Yeah, why isn't that mandatory every year? Why? And yet we make them take career planning as if somehow they have a clue who they are and what they might want.
Right?
But we don't teach them who they are or how to go and create. Like, it's just bananas. I can't even. Don't get me started.
Yes,
If
please
you're
sign
an
up for
educator,
$100,000
yeah,
worth of student loans on something that you're never going to do.
and you don't have the emotional capacity to manage, right? So if you're an educator and you're listening to this, let me know. I just want to tell you, I think that teachers are probably the most undervalued people in the world. I think you're incredible
100%.
people. And I think that for the most part, regardless of how you teach or what you do, you are working in a broken system.
Yep.
And I'm sure that most of you try your best to reform that, or at least within your four walls of your classroom on a daily basis. And I just want to say respect.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, there's never anything on that personal level that, I mean, it's all systemic. There's so many systemic issues.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now that we're all in love with you and want to take you home with us, how do we find you, stalk you, watch everything you've ever created, and join your programs?
I love that. Well, my website, alypain.com, is full of enormous, so the blogs, I put out a new one every single Tuesday. It's all tips, stories. It's actually all there. You can find me on Instagram at Aly Pain, and on TikTok at Aly Pain, where daily I'm putting out lots of tips and content. Should you choose to have a binge sesh or like really take notes, and it's all there. There you go. It's all there. And my programs run 3 to 4 times a year, and those are always on my website. So, or they're in the links in my profile from social media.
Perfect. Okay. Signing up now. My daughters are 7 and 8, but we're approaching that cusp, and I really feel like this conversation was personally helpful, and I will make sure that my husband listens, but then it was also great that it's recorded. I mean, if other people enjoy it, great.
Yeah, and let's just say right now, share.
Yes.
Share away. If like yourself, you've got kind of pre-tweens. Because again, the brain development is very unique. It can start at 9 to 14. It really depends. Share this podcast, please, with parents who have yet to be notified of the small print, have
Right.
yet to know that this glorious stage of semi-independence is going to end. And that it's not their fault and it's not their child's fault. Please share. Just share away.
Oh my gosh.
Just spam your whole network.
It just excites me so much how different years could be and like entire trajectories of lives can be just by hearing this episode alone. I mean, seriously.
Yeah. Don't get me started. I always, I say to my husband sometimes in my tough days, I say, I wonder who I would have been if I had a parenting experience that I managed to create for my kids. I wonder who I would have been. And I don't say that because I think I'm perfect and I'm all that, because holy Hannah, I'm not. I just wonder who I would have been without 26 years of abuse. I wonder.
Yeah, and even if abuse wasn't in your past or isn't happening in your current home, do not discount the power of just creating a healthy sense of belonging in your home.
Yeah, because the irony is, people always say, "Oh, I'm so sorry that happened," or "Oh, and I go, you know what? I'm grateful, because it is only because I know this pain personally and have done the work to be with, live through, and heal from it that I can offer what I offer. And so I truly believe it was a part of who the path I was supposed to walk.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of peace to that, but it doesn't mean it's not hard.
No. Oh, no. Heck no.
Well, thank you. Thank you for stepping into that purpose and for creating your content and for being that platform and for reiterating all the things spoken today 100 more times because it needs to be heard.
Thank you for doing this. Thank you. This just needs to be out there, and I'm grateful that you have also taken the time and energy to do this. Because one day it'll be mandatory for all parents.
Yes.
For good reason.
Yes. Ugh. Okay, well, I can't let you go until I ask you the last question I ask every guest, which is, how are you the mom that your kids need?
So the first thing that popped into my mind was emotional safety. And I guess what I mean by that is it is absolutely safe for them to come and say, ask, do anything, and we will have a conversation about it. There is no shame, condemnation, judgment, criticism. It's a conversation, which builds connection and learning, regardless of what they choose.
That's such a gift.
So I guess that also would point to unconditional love. We don't always agree, but I do always love them.
They're lucky to have you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Aly.
Thank you.
I'm not crying. You're crying. That one was deep and meaningful and needed, and I really hope that it spoke to you no matter what age your kids are, that you can take that perspective and apply it to your situation. And I'd love to hear what this episode meant to you. I would love to hear that you shared it with your partner. I would love to hear what conversations have come as a result when you shared this episode with your friends. Go ahead and let Aly and I know. We would love that. Find her in all her places. Come find me on Instagram if you haven't yet already. I'm at parent_wholeheartedly. And again, I'm so glad you're here. Leave a review for the podcast so more moms can find it. And thank you for coming on this journey with me. I believe in you, and I'm cheering you on.